The Hidden Life of the Prophet Muhammad. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This book continues the story of the Arab sugar daddy and the beautiful Indian girl, and the story of the Indian child bride and the old Arab husband, and the story of the Indian Miss World and the rage of Muslims of the world, and the story of Christina and the complete Jew, and also the story of the tears of God. They have been written in English and translated into Arabic by the author Dr. Ahmed. This novel resonates with genuine love, strong resilience, and steadfast courage. I invite you to accompany me as I continue narrating the story of the rare, fabulous beauty of the Indian daughter, Ifat Khan, and her extremely beautiful mother, Rehana Khan. Before we dive in the tapestry of the story, I would like to remind the reader this novel is narrated in 6 books. Book 1, The Arab Sugar Daddy and the Beautiful Indian Girl. Book 2, The Indian Child Bride and the Old Arab Husband. Book 3, The Indian Miss World and the Rage of Muslims of the World. Book 4, Christina and the Complete Jew. Book 5, The Tears of God, Jews, Blacks, and Muslim Women. And Book 6, The Hidden Life of the Prophet Muhammad. This is an intriguing epic story which exhibits resilience, love, and sacrifice. Book 6. Exposing the unspoken life story of the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief passages from a review for printing in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. All characters in this novel are fictional, and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is merely coincidental. Chapter 21. The Islamic Wars of Apostasy. According to the Muslim scholar, Dr. Raghib El-Surghani, Islam is the last message of God, in Arabic Allah, to mankind. Allah God orders Muslims to spread this message by their swords all over the world. God knows that everywhere people will stand against Muslims and by their swords and spears, prevent them from coming to their lands and spreading Allah's message. Therefore, Muslims have to fight them, kill them, possess their properties, women, and children, and occupy their lands and spread Islam. Based on this, Muslims believe that Allah God orders them to invade other countries to take the peoples of those lands from the worship of human beings and idols to the worship of their Lord and Creator, from the injustice of other religions to the justice of Islam, and from their suffering in the world to the happiness of the world. According to the Quran, Muslims are the best community ever created by Allah, Surah 3, verse 110. The Prophet Muhammad explains why the Muslim community is the best. Narrated Abu Huraira, the verse, "You are the best of peoples ever raised up for mankind," means, the best of peoples for the people, as you bring them with chains on their necks till they embrace Islam, Sahih al-Bukhari. Therefore, the Muslim community is the best because they invade countries, fight, and kill men, and put some of them along with their women and children in chains until they embrace Islam, and hence save them from spending their eternity in hellfire, instead securing for them a place in paradise with the beautiful virgins and rivers of wine. No doubt, people will resist, and Muslims must force them to submit to Islam for their good. According to Dr. Raghib El-Surghani, most countries touched by Islam have encountered the sword. The entire Persian Empire, which today includes Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, including East Europe, Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Kosovo. Through the sword they also opened, invaded, conquered and captured the Sham, Levant or Fertile Crescent, which today are Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, parts of South Turkey, Anatolia, and Asia Minor. The capital of the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople, today Istanbul in Turkey, was opened, invaded and captured, through jihad in the way of Allah. All of Eastern Europe was opened in jihad in the way of Allah, and remained in Islamic countries for centuries such as Greece, Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Cyprus, Malta, etc. All of North Africa was opened through jihad, beginning in Egypt, then Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Sudan, and Central and Western Africa. Through jihad, Muslims also invaded Andalusia, Iberian Peninsula, today Spain and Portuguese, and reached South France. Dr. Raghib El-Serghani said, "Many Muslims today are ashamed to admit this fact, spread of Islam through the sword." According to him, only a few countries such as Malaysia and Indonesia, which Islam came to them through trade. The Prophet Muhammad fought 28 battles, most of them against the pagan Arabs who lived in South, East, and Central Arabia, which used to live outside the Byzantine Empire. He made 2 attempts to invade the Levant, today Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Israel, but both attempts were frustrated by the Byzantine army and their Christian Arab allies. His first attempt was a small army of 3,000 fighters. The Prophet Muhammad informed his troops that Allah had promised them possession of the treasures of the Roman and Persian empires. To fulfill this promise, the Prophet sent his military commander, Zayd ibn Harith, with 3,000 soldiers to Syria to invade the Roman Empire, and the Prophet knew exactly what they are going to face, and what would be the results. Ibn Kathir, page 241. When Hercules of the Romans, Muslim historians and commentators refer to the Byzantines as Romans, heard about the approaching army, he came himself to meet those who dared to come near the boundary of his kingdom, with 100,000 Romans and 100,000 allied Arab tribes living near his border. The huge army of Hercules killed the 3 leaders of the invading army and many Muslim soldiers. When Khalid bin al-Walid saw the defeat of the army, he took the flag of Islam and withdrew with the remaining soldiers and returned to Medina. At the gate of the city, the people threw sand at the returning soldiers and rebuked them for fleeing from battle, page 470. However, the Prophet corrected the people and told them, "They have not run away, but they withdrew for the time being," page 470. The words of the Prophet revealed that he still insisted on the invasion of the Romans and Caesar. After some time, the Prophet himself went to invade Syria with 30,000 soldiers and 10,000 horses, page 532. When the Muslim troops reached the border of the Roman Empire in Syria, Byzantine Empire, and Hercules, the great leader of the Romans, gathered a huge army at Homs city, Emesa, to meet them, the Prophet Muhammad changed his mind and returned to Yathrib, Medina, K. Ibn Kathir, page 178, and Ibn Said al-Nas, page 277. To find justification for the return of the Prophet without meeting the Romans, the narrators of the Sirah, biography of Muhammad, blamed the Jews for a conspiracy. According to al-Bahaqi, the reason which led the Prophet to go to the Romans was a Jewish conspiracy, but Allah saved him from that conspiracy. The conspiracy was revealed to the Prophet through the angel Gabriel when he reached Tabuk, and hence he cancelled the invasion and returned to Medina, page 533, Quran, Surah Al-Isra 17, verses 76 to 77. Therefore, the promise to conquer the Romans and possess their treasures and women had not been fulfilled at the time of the Prophet. The Prophet said to his followers, "Invade Tabuk, you will possess the daughters of the people of the yellow color, and the women of the Romans." One of his leaders, Al-Jad ibn Qais, said, "Give us your permission, but do not tempt us with women." Al-Tabari explaining the verse of the Quran in Surah Al-Tawbah 9, verse 49. The Prophet Muhammad knew that his men became Muslims either through the use of force or for the sake of the war booties, forgetting the women, children, wealth, and properties of the non-believers. Therefore, as we shall see, all the Islamic conquests, invasions, were motivated by the war booties, especially the women of the infidels. This fact is stated by Dr. Sayyid al-Kimni in his book, The Wars of the Prophet's State, 2001. Before the immigration from Mecca to Medina, the message of Islam was based on a peaceful approach with full freedom of faith. It also admonishes the faithful to be patient and wait for their rewards in heaven, the virgins of paradise, and the rivers of wine, milk, and honey. However, after the immigration to Medina, all the followers of the Islamic community, Ansars and Muhajirin. Ansars were the supporters of the Prophet who lived in Medina, and Muhajirin were those who fled with him from Mecca to Medina, were changed into fighters and attackers, a complete state of soldiers and invaders, exactly like the tribe, and with its logic. This is after the allegiance has changed from the tribe and its worshipped ancestor to the state, which represents the men of war and blood. Al-Kimni 2001, page 164. Concerning the change, which brought a sudden increase in the number of the Prophet's followers and led to the victory of Badr, Al-Kimni states, and here is the most dangerous material change, which played a significant role in attracting the warriors from the weak tribes, after the Prophet's 13-year sojourn in Mecca, inviting people to his faith without much success. At that time, the invitation postponed the promise of enjoyment and abundance to the everlasting paradise. However, when it was announced that Allah had permitted the Prophet and the faithful to possess the wealth of the unbelievers, then the solution became an earthly and material fact, with other tempting gains before the weak among the people. These earthly and material gains attracted many weak people to join the army of the new state, page 165. Dr. Sayyid Al-Kimni continues, the Islamic army attacked the tribes in the Arabian Peninsula and subjected them by force to its new state, after terrorizing them so that they have to join the Medinian alliance. Al-Kimni 1996, page 235. Al-Kimni gives many examples to show how Muhammad terrorized the Arabs and the Jewish tribes and subjected them by the sword to his new state. The Arabs of Bani Salim, that great tribe, fled from their dwelling places as soon as they heard about the approaching Islamic troops. They left behind their houses and cattle. The Muslims stayed 3 days in their houses and returned to Yathrib, Medina, with great booty. Sayyid Al-Kimni says, Islam divides the world into 2 parts, Dar al-Islam, land of Islam, which are the lands of peace and security that include the Muslim countries, and Dar al-Harb, lands of war, which include all the countries of the world that Muslim army can attack any time whenever there is good chance to do so. Al-Kimni 2004, page 190. The obligation of jihad began after Muhammad and his followers fled from Mecca to Medina. Our history says to us, resumes Al-Kimni, after the immigration of Muslims from Mecca to Yathrib/Medina, were the alliances of the Prophet and Banu Hashim from the most able warriors of the tribes of Awaz and Khazraj, were the Jewish factories of weapons, and were the good geographic location. The Muslims started attacking the Meccans and the rest of the Arabs. This happened in the form of organized and continuous invasions and attacks. The first attacking group was led by Abd Allah ibn Gahash, in which he violated the conditions of the holy months. The group killed, robbed, and took captives from that Meccan caravan. Those attacks and robberies continued in the Arabian Peninsula until turned to Islamic invasions in other countries of the world. In all their offensive battles, the Muslims were always the attackers except in 2 battles, the Battle of Uhud and the Battle of the Ditch, pages 190 to 191. The Prophet Muhammad always gets 1/5 of the booty, Surah Anfal 18, verse 41. The share of the Prophet was decided for the first time by his uncle Abd Allah ibn Gahash in his attack on the Battle of Al-Nakala. That battle was in which he violated the forbidden months and captured the booty of the caravan. It was the first plunder for the Muslims. Abd Allah said, the 1/5 in everything we loot is for the Messenger of Allah, and the rest should be divided between us. A Quranic revelation came after the confirming what the uncle of the Prophet has decided, page 236, Surah Al-Anfal 18, verse 41. After the Battle of Badr, it became clear to the Arabs that the attitudes of the Muslims had changed. The Muslims began to go out in ceaseless military campaigns to cut the alliances to Mecca and the inside trade roads, and attacking the tribes in their dwelling places to terrorize them so that they should cut their alliances with Mecca and subject them by force to the Islamic State, page 238. Sayyid Al-Kimni says, Osama ibn Zayd led another campaign to terrorize the Romans, for terrorism is one of the important pillars of Islam, and its means to victory. 1 page 92, emphasis is mine. Through this assertion, Dr. Syed Al-Khimni admits that Islam is not only spread by the sword, but it is the religion of terrorists and terrorism. While Osama bin Zayd preparing his troops to invade the Roman lands, the Prophet Muhammad commanded him, attack them in the darkness of the dawn and fall on them killing and burn them with fire and invade them and return with the booties. Al-Khimni 2004, pages 191 to 192, quoting Ibn Kathir in Al-Bidayah wa Al-Nihaya, pages 139 and 143, and Al-Tabari in Tariq al-Rizal wa al-Maluk, page 156. To support his point, Al-Khimni refers to the Prophet's hadiths in which he said, I have been granted victory through terrorism. I have been sent with the sword between my hands so that no one should be worshipped except Allah. Allah makes my living under the tip of my spear. I have commanded to fight people until they bear witness that there is no God, but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. The Quran also supported the sayings of the Prophet in the following verse, O you who believe! Fight those who are close to you or unbelievers, and let them find hardness in you. And know that Allah is with those who believe in Him. Surah 9, verse 123. After the death of Muhammad, the majority or almost the entire Arabian Peninsula apostatized except for two cities, Mecca and Medina, and one small town, Al-Taif, and a small village, Hagar. The general apostasy followed immediately upon the death of Muhammad. The widely spread apostasy was a natural consequence of the forcible way that the pagan Arabs were compelled to accept Islam on pain of death. For prominent Arab leaders and one powerful woman declared themselves to be prophets of Allah, Musaylima, had 100,000 followers. Al-Asdi had the largest tribe of Banu Asad as his followers. Al-Aswad al-Yanasi had 10,000 followers. Tulayha ibn Khuwaylid and Saja, a female prophetess who had also 100,000 followers. The vast number of followers of those self-appointed prophets and prophetess led many prominent companions of the Prophet Muhammad to conclude that Islam died with its founder. Most of the companions of Muhammad told the first caliph, the first successor of Prophet Muhammad, Abu Bakr al-Siddiq, to forget about Islam and consider it a story that came to an end with the death of the Prophet. Nevertheless, Abu Bakr insisted on keeping Islam going and vowed to fight everyone who forsook Islam, including those who refused to pay the zakat to him, compulsory tithes. There were two kinds of apostasy. One group flatly rejected Islam because they were forced by the sword to embrace it, and the second group continued to be Muslims but refused to pay the zakat to the new caliph Abu Bakr. The first group was the majority, and most of them were now following newly self-proclaimed prophets. Abu Bakr made an oath to fight them and quoted a hadith of the Prophet to justify his decision to kill those who either rejected Islam or those who refused to pay the zakat after the death of Muhammad. The main reason behind such general apostasy was that 90% of the Arabs were forced by the sword to accept Islam against their wishes. Omar, who would become the second caliph, stood against the decision of Abu Bakr. He argued that many of those apostates were not truly apostates, but Muslims refused to pay the zakat to the new caliph because they were not consulted when he was chosen. Nevertheless, the new caliph firmly decided to go into major battles with those apostates. His decision began the bloody atrocities committed under the first Islamic wars of apostasy. Abu Bakr prepared 11 warring groups to fight the apostates. He decided to send each group to an apostatized tribe and fight its followers. He knew full well that the Arab apostates were not united under one leadership, and hence fighting them would not be difficult as long as they were fragmented. He first sent one group to fight one of the self-proclaimed prophets. The first group was defeated by the troops of the self-appointed prophet, Musaylima, and the few survivors fled back to Medina. A second group was sent to fight Musaylima, and was defeated too. After his 2 consecutive victories, Musaylima decided to marry the self-proclaimed prophetess, Saja, and merge her troops with his, giving him a fighting force of 200,000. Saja accepted the proposal, but before their marriage and alliance took place, the Caliph Abu Bakr joined all his remaining 9 groups into one single big army and sent them to fight against Musaylima at the famous Battle of the Yamama, December 632. The United Caliph's army was led by the military genius Khalid ibn al-Walid, known as the Sword of Islam. This Khalid would turn out to be the main cause of the defeat not only of the Arab apostates, but he would destroy the Persian army and turn the entire Persian Empire Muslim. He also would defeat and expel the Byzantine army out of the Levant. Khalid's combined troops were defeated twice by Musaylima's fighters before they won the Battle of Yamama. The victory of Yamama gave the Muslims the upper hand over the other apostatized tribes. After that, Khalid fought 11 battles against the Arab apostates in Yemen, Bahrain, Oman, south of Arabia, south of Mecca, north of Medina, north of the Arabian Peninsula, etc. Many of the apostates were forced back to Islam and thousands were killed. Those surrendered fighters who refused to renounce their apostasy and re-embrace Islam were killed through beheading, drowning in wells, and throwing from high mountain cliffs, while many were burned alive. All the false prophets were slain except the prophetess Sajah. She repented and returned to Islam. Muslim historians differed about the fate of Sajah. According to one source, Sajah claimed to be a prophetess after learning that Musaylima and Talayha had declared themselves prophets of Allah. However, before claiming to be a prophetess, Sajah was a soothsayer. This source said that Sajah had married Musaylima and accepted his claim to be a prophet of Allah. Khalid ibn al-Walid defeated all the apostates of Sajah, and then moved and crushed Musaylima and his followers at the Battle of Yamama. When Sajah learned that Musaylima was defeated and killed, she repented and returned to Islam. According to Al-Kimni, the wars of Abu Bakr were meant to subdue the Arab tribes who refused to accept his caliphate after the death of the Prophet because they had not been consulted and hence, they stopped paying the zakat. Omar ibn al-Khattab and some of the companions protested against those wars because the tribes were still Muslims and killing them would contradict the hadith of the Prophet in which he said, I have been commanded to fight all people until they bear witness there is no God except Allah, and Muhammad the Messenger of Allah, page 214. During those wars of apostasy, the caliph's fighters, says Al-Kimni, committed hideous crimes in which some Muslims were drowned in wells, others thrown from high mountains, and yet others burned with fire. Al-Kimni narrates a story in which the leader of the Muslim troops, Khalid ibn al-Walid, one of the 10 Muslims who had been promised paradise by the Prophet Muhammad, had killed the leader of the tribe of Bani Yarbu, a large section of the tribe of Bani Tamim, because he had a beautiful wife. According to the story, the leader and his men informed Khalid that they were still Muslims. To prove their adherence to Islam, they told Khalid that they had just finished their evening prayer. Khalid ordered them to surrender themselves and lay down their weapons and promised to negotiate the matter with them. When the members of Bani Yarbu tribe surrendered themselves, Khalid ordered his men to kill them all. According to Al-Kimni, Khalid's motive was to kill the leader of Bani Yarbu's tribe, Malik ibn Nuwayriya, and take his wife, Layla bint al-Minhal, because she was an incredibly beautiful woman. Khalid slept with the woman on the same night he killed her husband, and in that, he disobeyed the Quran because he did not wait for the Ida time, 3 months and 10 days. When Khalid returned to Medina, Omar met him and said to him, You have killed a Muslim man and taken his wife and committed adultery with her. I swear by Allah, I will stone you to death, page 217. However, the Caliph Abu Bakr did not consider Khalid to have committed murder and adultery, and hence did not punish him. Omar did not accept the decision of Abu Bakr and said to Khalid, You are the enemy of Allah because you have killed a Muslim man and raped his wife. As we shall see, when Omar became a caliph after the death of Abu Bakr, he took revenge on Khalid by removing him from the leadership of the Muslim army in the Levant. For Al-Kimni, people like Khalid and Abu Bakr should not be given respect because they were not worthy of respect due to their abuses. He further argued that those early wars were falsely forged and are taught to Muslim children in schools to this day as just wars, page 219. Those wars were political and meant to force the tribes to accept the caliphate of Abu Bakr, which was forced on them. Therefore, any Muslim who protested against Abu Bakr's leadership was condemned as an apostate and deserved to be killed, his wife taken, his money stolen, and his children sold as slaves in the slave market, page 248. The decision of Abu Bakr became a horrifying and terrorist law even today in the Sharia, which takes away the faith of people, reaches their necks, not clear in meaning, exposes their women, destroys their honors, enslaves their children, and robs them of their money and property, page 250. No Muslim scholar is prepared to tell the common Muslims that the great companions of the Prophet protested against the Caliph's decision, among whom was Omar ibn al-Khattab, although Omar retreated from his protest when he declared that I saw Allah has put the decision in the heart of Abu Bakr and hence I knew it was the truth, page 251. Al-Kimni concluded that most of the decisions which had been clothed with divinity and become swords on the necks of the worshippers came as a result of those personal decisions. For example, Bukhari included in his Sahih some hadiths and rejected some hadiths because his heart told him which were right and which were wrong. Therefore, al-Bukhari became divine and the author of a divine book which all the scholars agreed is the most authentic book on earth after the Book of Allah. Abu Bakr sent another army under the leadership of Amr ibn al-As to the apostatized tribes of Tsuzai and Wadi and defeated them in the area of Tabuk and Damatul Jandal. After all the apostates were defeated and subdued, Abu Bakr understood that the Arabs might rebel against him again. To mitigate this, he decided to send them out of Arabia, on a mission to invade the Persian Empire and the Byzantine Empire. He, more than most, understood that most of them became Muslims singularly for the prospect of war booty, wealth and women. Before Islam, the Arabs were warring tribes that survived in attacking and invading each other. They lived in an arid desert that had scarcely any means of survival. Therefore, they survived by invading and looting each other. They were following a war maxim which said Mn Galba Salba, the winners of any fight have the right to possess the wealth, property, slaves, women, and children of the losers. Muhammad understood the mentality of his people, and hence legalized through a false divine claim the maxim of the Arab tribes, invade and win. In a fleeting time, he used military force and united all the tribes into one single state of Yathrib, Medina. As we have seen, after his death many tribes rebelled but were defeated and brought back by the sword of Islam to the newly founded state of Medina. As we have seen also, the main cause of their defeat was the lack of central authority and unity. Chapter 22. The Islamic invasions of other countries. As soon as Khalid ibn al-Walid finished the wars of apostasy, the Caliph Abu Bakr sent him to begin invading the lands of the Persian Empire in Iraq. At that time, the Persian Empire consisted of Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and many countries in eastern Anatolia and southern Russia. At that time, the Persian Empire was already depleted by its many wars against the Byzantine Empire. Neither empire was prepared to enter into any major conflict. As we shall see, this factor will contribute to the repaid, not clear, military successes of the Muslim army in its many battles with the Persian and Byzantine armies. In an abbreviated period of 25 years, the Muslim state occupied the entire Persian Empire, the Levant, Egypt, and all of North Africa. Khalid ibn al-Walid proved to be a military genius in all his battles with the Persians and Byzantines. According to many historians, Khalid ibn al-Walid never lost a battle. In one of his early battles, Khalid said to the Persian leader in Iraq, "We come to you with men who love death as your men love life, therefore, submit to Islam, and you will be spared." This statement is repeated today by the fighters of ISIS in every battle they wage. They always claim to be fearless fighters who love death. This statement revealed two key facts. Firstly, at that time, Muslims were in high spirits of fighting. They loved to fight because they believed that if they won, they would get 4/5 of the booties, women, and wealth of the infidels, and if they died, they would go to paradise and get the 72 virgins, 100 beautiful boys, and rivers of wine, milk, and honey. Secondly, the Persians were not willing to fight at all. They had to be forced to remain on the battlefields. In one battle, called the Zat Salisil, the Battle of Chains, the fighting Persians were chained to each other because their leaders knew that they would flee otherwise. Khalid ibn al-Walid fought 16 battles in Iraq against the Persians. Due to his military prowess, he won them all. Every Persian who refused to accept Islam was killed. Many Persians were converted to Islam out of fear of the sword of Khalid. In brief time, all the inhabitants of Iraq became Muslims, and the country automatically became part of the newly founded Islamic State of Medina. Later on, the capital of the Islamic Caliphate became Baghdad city. Muslims gained so much weaponry and booty in those battles. When Abu Bakr saw that Khalid won all the battles against the Persians, he decided to send him to invade the Byzantine Empire. Khalid left half of his troops in Persia, and took the other half, and moved to Syria, 9,000 fighters. Abu Bakr had already sent an army under the leadership of Abu Ubaidah al-Jarrah. Abu Ubaida's army had already fought for small battles with the Byzantines, and won 2 and lost 2. When Khalid arrived in Syria, he took over the leadership of the Muslim army. The Caliph Abu Bakr was the one who ordered Khalid to be the main leader of the 2 joined Muslim armies in the Levant. Khalid then fought 5 small battles against the Byzantines, and won all of them. According to the Muslim scholar, Dr. Raghib el-Surgani, Khalid ibn al-Walid fought 11 battles in the Ridda Wars, Wars of Apostasy. He also fought 16 battles against the Persian armies, and defeated them in all. In the Alias battle, Muslims killed 70,000 Persians. Abu Bakr moved Khalid from Iraq to the Sham, Levant, to fight the Romans, Byzantines. The first major battle between the Muslims and Byzantines was called the Battle of Ajnadin, Jordan today. According to Dr. Raghib el-Surgani, there were 100,000 Romans against 33,000 Muslims. Muslim historians always exaggerate the numbers of the enemy. Before the battle, the Byzantine commander in charge of the battle asked the leader Khalid, "Why did you come to fight against us? Why don't you go and invade Ethiopia or Persia?" He even proposed to help the Muslims to invade the Persians. Then, he resorted to bribery to prevent the battle. He told Khalid that he was ready to pay each Muslim soldier 2 dinars, a pair of clothes, pay 10,000 dinars to Khalid, and 20,000 to the Caliph Abu Bakr. Khalid rejected the offer and insisted on the fight. He gave the Byzantines 3 choices: convert to Islam, pay the jizya to Muslims, or the sword, fighting. The Byzantines rejected the first 2 choices, and went to battle at Ajnadin. Of course, the Byzantines were not willing to fight, and hence Muslims got the upper hand and defeated them. They killed 3,000 Byzantines. Shortly after that battle, the first Caliph Abu Bakr died and Omar ibn al-Khattab took over. The second Caliph Omar immediately removed Khalid ibn al-Walid, the so-called Saifullah, or Sword of Allah, and reappointed the former leader, Abu Ubaidah al-Jarrah instead. Omar justified his decision by saying that he was worried that Muslims began to put so much trust in Khalid rather than Allah. The majority of them thought that without Khalid they couldn't win any battle. Although Khalid was removed from the leadership of the army in reality, he continued to be the brains behind any military maneuver. Abu Ubaidah al-Jarrah took no action or made any decisions without consulting Khalid. In the main decisive battle of Yarmouk, Abu Ubaidah al-Jarrah disobeyed the decision of the second Caliph Omar, and stepped aside to give Khalid autonomous control. According to another source, the Byzantine king asked Muaz ibn Jabal, "Why do you come to our countries and want to fight against us? Why don't you go and invade Ethiopia? We can help you to invade and defeat the Persian Empire." Muaz ibn Jabal said to the Byzantine king, "God said we have to fight those who are close to us first, and then we will go to fight those who are far from us." Muaz ibn Jabal based his reply on a verse of the Quran which commands Muslims to fight unbelievers. "O you who believe, fight those who are close to you or unbelievers, and let them find hardness in you." And know that Allah is with those who believe in Him. Surah 9, verse 123. The Byzantine king offered to give a lot of money and clothes to the Arab Muslims if they agreed to forsake their fight with them and return to their countries, but the Muslims refused and insisted on fighting. The Byzantine army was not ready to go into major battle after the massive battle that was fought against the Persian army, in which it lost half of its military power a mere 25 years ago. Moreover, the Byzantine Empire lost one-third of its population due to the plague, which was known as the Black Death. 30 million people died in that deadly plague. All those factors combined discouraged the Byzantines from fighting the invading army of Muslims, and eventually contributed to their defeat in 3 major battles against the Muslims: Battle of Ajnadin, Battle of Fal, and Battle of the Yarmouk. In the ultimate Battle of the Yarmouk, according to Dr. Raghib El-Serghani, Muslims killed 140,000 Christian fighters. The army of the Byzantine consisted of Greek Christians and Arab Christians. Muslims killed only 50,000 and 90,000 jumped to their death off the cliff, when they had no place to flee from the killing machine of the Muslim army. Once again, it was Khalid who chose the battlefield, and he knew that there was only one way out for the Byzantines if they were defeated. The defeat of the Battle of the Yarmouk ended the control of the Byzantine Empire of the Sham, Levant. The Byzantine Emperor, Heraclius, accepted the fact that the defeat of his army at the Battle of the Yarmouk was God's decision and a result of the sins of the people of the land, including his. Heraclius took to sea on a ship to Constantinople in the night. It is said that as his ship set sail, he bade a last farewell to Syria, saying, "Farewell, a long farewell to Syria, my fair province. Thou art an infidel's enemies now. Peace be with you, O Syria, what a beautiful land you will be for the enemy." Battle of the Yarmouk, Wikipedia. According to most historians, the Arab Christians did not show much resistance to the invading Muslim troops. Some historians went further than that and claimed the Arab Christians gladly welcomed the Muslim Arabs and assisted them in occupying their lands, because they were ill-treated by the Byzantine Empire. Moreover, there was a religious disagreement about the nature of Christ, one nature versus two natures, and that difference led to many persecutions of the Arab Christians by the Greek Christians. During the Muslim siege of the second largest city, Damascus, which was considered the second capital of the Byzantine Empire after Constantinople, the Bishop of Damascus helped Khalid ibn al-Walid to enter the city. He informed Khalid that the Byzantine soldiers were having a birthday party for a big military general, and they were fully drunk and spent the entire night in an orgy. Ever helpful, the bishop supplied ladders to Khalid, and hence assisted him take the city. After the capture of Damascus, only Palestine and Lebanon remained in the control of the Byzantines. Muslim troops went on to lead a siege on Aelia. Jerusalem continued to be called by that name after it had been renamed 7 centuries ago by the Roman Empire Hadrian. When the city refused to surrender, Muslims used catapults and rained large stones on the city. At that time, only Christians dwelt in the city. Jews were forbidden from dwelling in Jerusalem. Most of them lived in small towns in Palestine. The inhabitants of Aelia, Jerusalem was renamed by the Muslims and became known as Al-Qudus, agreed to surrender, but they said they would surrender the city only to the Caliph Omar himself. Omar accepted their demand and came in person and received the keys to the city. When the Christians of Jerusalem surrendered to the Muslims and agreed to pay the jizya, one of their conditions to the Caliph Omar was not to allow any Jew to dwell with them. Jews were allowed to come as pilgrims but not to stay in the city. Nonetheless, the city opened its doors to the Muslims and allowed them to dwell side by side with them. Nevertheless, Caliph Omar made an unfair pact with all the Arab Christians of the Levant and made their religious leaders sign it in every city and town and abide by it. That pact is known as the Omarian Pact and continued to be the guiding principles for centuries to come that govern the relationship between the Christians and Muslims. The Omarian Pact. 1. We shall not build in our cities or their neighborhood new monasteries, churches, convents, or monks' cells, nor shall we repair, by day or by night, such of them as fall in ruins or are situated in the quarters of the Muslims. 2. We shall keep our gates wide open for passers-by and travelers. We shall give board and lodging to all Muslims who pass our way for 3 days. 3. We shall not give shelter in our churches or our dwellings to any spy, nor hide him from the Muslims. 4. We shall not teach the Quran to our children. 5. We shall not manifest our religion publicly nor convert anyone to it. We shall not prevent any of our kin from entering Islam if they wish it. 6. We shall show respect toward the Muslims, and we shall rise from our seats when they wish to sit. 7. We shall not seek to resemble the Muslims by imitating any of their garments, the kalansawa, the turban, footwear, or the parting of the hair. We shall not speak as they do, nor shall we adopt their kunyas, family names. 8. We shall not mount on saddles, nor shall we grind swords, bear any kind of arms, nor carry them on our persons. 9. We shall not engrave Arabic inscriptions on our seals. 10. We shall not sell fermented drinks. 11. We shall clip the fronts of our heads. 12. We shall always dress in the same way wherever we may be, and we shall bind the zunnah, belts for identification, around our waist. 13. We shall not display our crosses or our books on the roads or markets of the Muslims. We shall use only clappers in our churches very softly. We shall not raise our voices when following our dead. We shall not show lights on any of the roads of the Muslims or in their markets. We shall not bury our dead near the Muslims. 14. We shall not take slaves who have been allotted to Muslims. 15. We shall not build houses overtopping the houses of the Muslims. 16. When I brought the letter to Omar, may God be pleased with him, he added, we shall not strike a Muslim. 17. We accept these conditions for ourselves and the people of our community, and in return, we receive safe conduct. 18. If we in any way violate these undertakings for which we ourselves stand surety, we forfeit our covenant dhimmi, and we become liable to the penalties for contumacy and sedition. 19. Omar ibn al-Khattab replied, sign what they ask, but add 2 clauses and impose them in addition to those which they have undertaken. They are, they shall not buy anyone made prisoner by the Muslims, and whoever strikes a Muslim with deliberate intent shall forfeit the protection of this pact. Despite those unfair conditions of the Omarian pact, still, the Christians of the Levant preferred to be under Muslim rule rather than Byzantine rule. According to the well-renowned Muslim commentator, Ibn Kathir, the Caliph Omar ibn al-Khattab made those conditions with the Nasara of the Sham, Christians of Levant, to subdue, degrade, and humiliate them because they refused to accept the prophethood of their master Muhammad. After the defeat of the Byzantine army and capturing the main 2 cities in the Levant, Damascus, and Jerusalem, 2 important occurrences took place. Omar was killed by a Persian convert as revenge, and a deadly plague began in a small village in Palestine called Emmaus, which killed 75% of the Muslim soldiers who participated in the jihad in the Levant. The plague killed many soldiers and leaders including the chief commander of the Muslim armies, Abu Ubaidah al-Jarrah. Khalid lost 18 of his sons in that deadly plague. He made many Christian and Zoroastrian women, widows and children, orphans. He murdered 2 leaders and raped their wives on the same day he killed their husbands. He died a broken-hearted man. He continued to lament the loss of his sons, and while he was dying in his bed he said, I am dying as a she-camel dies. I believe the plague was the punishment of God for the atrocities that Muslim armies had done in Persia and the Levant. It wasn't a coincidence that the plague started in the village of Emmaus in which Jesus had a supper with 2 of his disciples after his resurrection, the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, verses 13 to 32. According to the historian, that year, the invasions of Muslims to the Levant region resulted in the destruction of churches and monasteries, the sacked towns, the fields laid waste, the villages burned down, by the Arabs who were overrunning the country that year, the decline of Eastern Christianity by Islam, from Jihad to Dimmited, London, 1996, page 44. Thousands of Christians died of famine that resulted from those attacks. Michael the Syrian mentioned that Omar sent Khalid with an army to the Aleppo and Antioch region. There they murdered an enormous number of people. No one escaped them. Whatever may be said of the evils that Syria suffered, they cannot be recounted because of their vast number, for the Arabs are God's wrath, Book 2, page 421. Muslims interpreted their rapid victories over the armies of the two superpowers at that time, the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire, as divine favor. However, historians pointed to many factors which contributed to the quick defeats of the Persians and Byzantines. The long-lasting wars between those two rival empires exhausted their military powers and financial resources. The Byzantine army was not ready to go into major battle after the massive battle that was fought against the Persian army, in which it lost half of its military power, decimated by a previous battle. Moreover, the Byzantine Empire lost one-third of its population due to the plague, which was known as the Black Death. 30 million people died in that deadly plague. Furthermore, the victory of the Arab Muslims over the Greek Byzantines was facilitated by the enemy within, the Arab Christians. Some of the Arab Christians smoothed the progress of the Arab Muslim troops by their unwillingness to resist their advance, and by literally helping them through spying and supplying the needed assistance to enter the fortress cities such as Damascus and Jerusalem. The murder of the Caliph Omar ibn al-Khattab. Omar used to warn his leaders and governors not to send any slave or a newly converted Muslim to his capital city in Medina. He feared one of their number, deprived of their wives, children, and relatives, might seek revenge on him. He called non-Arab people Alwoj, which means dirty or unclean. So in every letter he ordered his governors to keep the Alwoj out of his reach. Despite his fears and orders, one of the so-called Alwoj managed to reach him and take revenge on his family and children. Wikipedia gives us a good introduction to this person, who murdered the highest religious authority of the emerging Islamic State. Piraz Nahavandi, the Victorious, or Peruzan, also known by Arabs as Abu Lu'lu'a al-Nahawandi, they also call him Abu Lu'lu'a al-Farisi, was a Persian soldier who served under the commander Rostam Farrakhzad, but was captured in the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah in 636 CE, when the Persians were defeated by the Arab Muslim army of Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab on the western bank of the Euphrates River. After he was brought to Arabia as a prisoner, he managed to assassinate Umar in the Hijri year 23, 644 to 645 AD. Abu Lu'lu'a the Persian was one of the men who were taken captive in the city of Nahawand, Iran. The Arab Muslims destroyed his house, family, children, and country without them having done any evil to them. After he lost everything, he was taken captive to al-Mukhira ibn Shaba to work as his slave. For some reason, al-Mukhira sent him to Medina. When he reached Medina, he was grieved to see the captive children of his city and country, and other countries filling the streets of the city. He searched with a heavy heart for his children, but could not find them. The crying of those wretched children increased his grief. According to Ibn Sa'ad, Abu Lu'lu'a used to meet the children of captivity, and whenever he saw them, he used to cry and feel their heads with his hands and say, "The Arabs ate my liver." Then he killed Omar as a revenge for what he had done to the captives. Ibn Sa'ad, Al-Tabaqat al-Kabara, Volume 3, page 271. Abu Lu'lu'a murdered the Caliph Omar inside the mosque during the morning prayer. He pretended to be a Muslim and entered the mosque to pray behind the Caliph Omar. While the Caliph and the rest of the Muslims were kneeling in their prayer, Abu Lu'lu'a stopped his prayer, moved forward, and stabbed the Caliph Omar to death. He used a poisoned dagger to kill the Caliph Omar. It was the same method and for the same reason that the Prophet Muhammad was poisoned by the Jewish captive girl, Zainab bint al-Harith. During the Caliphate of Omar, Muslim troops invaded many countries and reached from Esfahan in Iran to Tripoli in Libya. 1. In the Islamic year 14, Damascus, Homs, Baalbek, and al-Basra were invaded and conquered. 2. In the year 15, Syria was invaded, and the Muslim troops defeated the Romans, the Byzantines, in the Battle of Al-Yarmouk, and conquered the Persians in the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah. 3. In the year 16, they invaded Al-Awaz and Al-Madain in the Battle of Jawala, and the Persian emperor was defeated and ran away in the Battle of Yazidigar. In the same year, Tikrit in the east of Iraq was invaded. Likewise, the Muslim army invaded Kanserine, Halab, Aleppo, Antakya, Antioch, Sarug, and Carcassa. 4. In the year 18, Gandabsior, Jawan, Al-Rahad, Simisa, Haran, Nasibian, Al-Mosul, Mosul, and Al-Jazeera between Iraq and Syria were invaded and looted. 5. In the year 19, some lands of Caesar were conquered. 6. In the year 20, the Islamic troops invaded the western part of Egypt and the city of Taistar in Iran. 7. In the year 21, Alexandria in Egypt, Nahawand in Iran, and Barca in Libya were invaded. 8. In the year 22, the Muslim army invaded Azerbaijan, Al-Dinia, Masabzank, Hazan, Al-Rai, Askar, and Kamwams in the middle of Asia, and Tripoli in Libya. 9. In the year 23, in which the Caliph Omar was assassinated, the Muslim army invaded Kerman, Sajistan, Makran, and Isfahan. In those bloody battles, thousands upon thousands of innocent people were murdered by the Muslim troops. Many women were raped and many children were enslaved and sold as slaves in the slave markets. Many houses were burnt and looted, and thousands of families were destroyed. The Muslims robbed and looted the treasures of those places and distributed the wealth, women, and children among themselves. It was not a religion that they wanted to preach, but to rob, enslave, and rape. This reminds us of the teaching of Jesus about Satan, in which he said, "The thief, Satan, comes not but to steal, to kill, and destroy, but I have come to give life and life in its abundance." The Gospel of John chapter 10, verse 10. If we compare the peaceful preaching and spreading of the gospel of Jesus by his apostles Peter, Paul, and the others among the pagans of the Roman Empire, and the spreading of the sword of Islam among the Christians of the Byzantine Empire, and the Zoroastrians of the Persian Empire. For sure, the above verse of Jesus makes a clear distinction between the work of Satan, killing, stealing, and destruction, and the work of God, giving life and life in its abundance. It is estimated that, during the 5 centuries of the spread of Islam, 270 million people were killed, of whom 80 million were Hindus and 60 million were Christians. To know how much damage and destruction those Muslim mujahideen did in those countries they invaded, read Al-Tabari in his huge volumes, Al-Tariq, or the History. One of those Muslim soldiers, an Arab by the name of Mahafaz, narrated one of his experiences in the battles. In the year 16, he participated in the Battle of Jawala in Iran. He said, "We entered the city, and I saw a woman like a deer in her beauty, and her face shines like the sun. I took her and her clothes, and she became Jariya, my slave girl." Al-Tabari Volume 4, pages 26 to 27. The aims of those battles and invasions were not only to enslave and rape the women of those countries, but also to loot their treasures. In a few years, the companions of the Prophet Muhammad became filthy rich, and their wealth was counted in millions of dinars. Before the advent of Islam, the Arabs of the Arabian Peninsula were living in poverty and continuous starvation. They used to suck the stones to slake their thirsty throats and dry tongues. The Byzantine commander understood the problem of those Muslims who came to fight him, and hence offered money and clothes to them, but they refused to accept them because they wanted the fertile lands of the Levant. In the abbreviated period, their invasions made them extraordinarily rich and enabled them to possess the lands of the so-called infidels. Just a few examples will show how much those companions stole from the countries they invaded. 1. When the third Caliph Osman was murdered, he had thousands of 1,000,000 and 500,000 of dirham, and 100,000 dinar. This is equal in our today counting millions of dollars. 2. Al-Zubair ibn al-Awwam had 51,000 dirhams, 51 million dirhams, and 200,000 dinars. Besides that, he had houses and estates in Alexandria, Basra, and Kufa, the capital of Iraq. When he died, he left behind his large garden. If it had been sold, it would have brought thousands of thousands, 1,600,000 dinars. 3. Abd el-Rahman ibn Awaf, when he died, left gold that they used axes to cut. 4. Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas left behind him 250,000 dirhams. 5. Ibn Masud left 90,000 dirhams. 6. Talha ibn Ubaydullah had in his hand a gold ring, which had a diamond in it. His daily income from his land in Iraq was 1,000 dirhams annually. When he died, he left 2,200,000 of dirham, and 200,000 of dinars. Moreover, he left 100 jars full of gold. 7. Omar ibn al-Ayaz, he opened Egypt, left behind him 70 jars of pure gold. While he was dying, he offered his gold to his sons, but they refused to accept it because they believed it had been taken unjustly. 8. When Zayd ibn Harith died, he left behind him gold that had been cut by axes. References: Tabaqat ibn Sa'ad, pages 53, 76, 77, 157, Al-Masudi in Muraj al-Zahab Volume 1, pages 544 to 545, and Kaitat al-Makarizi Volume 1, pages 140, 564. 9. The Islamic conquests or invasions continued after the assassination of the second Caliph Omar ibn al-Khattab. However, before Omar was justly killed, a Muslim leader led his troops without informing the Caliph Omar and marched toward the invasion of Egypt. At first, the Caliph Omar expressed his disapproval of such a step without his permission. Nevertheless, when the Caliph learned that his leader, Amir ibn al-Ayaz, had succeeded in invading Alexandria, he gave his approval of the campaign. There are two important things to mention regarding this invasion. First of all, Amir ibn al-Ayaz informed the Caliph Omar ibn al-Khattab that he found an exceptionally large library in Alexandria that had over 1 million books. The Caliph replied and instructed him that every book that doesn't honor Islam and exalt Allah, burn it. At that time, the Alexandrian library was the greatest and largest library in the Western world. It contained books on theology, philosophy, history, and various branches of science. Following the order of the Caliph of Medina, Amir ibn al-Ayaz set all the books aflame. It said that the fire and smoke continued for 6 months before every book was fully consumed and destroyed. The decision of the second Caliph of Islam became a guiding principle for Muslim troops wherever they went. Everywhere they went, they destroyed Christian churches and Hindu temples and burned to ashes the infidels' libraries. Sometimes, beautiful church buildings were spared and converted into Muslim mosques. The Coptic Christians of Egypt agreed to pay the jizya to the second Caliph, and therefore he allowed them to continue following their religion. The Caliph Omar appointed Amir ibn al-Ayaz the Wali of Egypt governor. Initially, Amir ibn al-Ayaz did something which made all the Copts to be happy. It happened to be their great spiritual leader, the Patriarch of Alexandria, the Pope of the Coptic Orthodox Church. Benjamin went into hiding for 11 years from the Byzantine authority. The Copts approached Amir ibn al-Ayaz and requested him to restore their fugitive, Patrick Benjamin. Amir accepted their request and restored their spiritual leader. However, such a favor met with another huge demand from jizya by the Caliph Omar. Amir ibn al-Ayaz tried to convince his Caliph that he was demanding too much from the Copts of Egypt. The Caliph said, enriching the Medina is more important than robbing Egypt. In other words, rob the Egyptians and enrich the Muslims of Medina, capital of the Islamic Caliphate. After the assassination of the second Caliph Omar, he was succeeded by Osman ibn Affan. During the Caliphate of Osman, Muslims invaded Libya, Tunisia, and Algeria, and reached up to Morocco. The Berber tribes of North Africa caused a fundamental problem for the Muslim invaders. Whenever they invaded a city and forcibly converted its inhabitants from Christianity to Islam, and moved to the next city, the former city would apostatize. Then, they had to return and reinvade and reconvert the citizens of that city. Many Berbers were killed during those processes. The Berbers managed to murder the main military commander of the Muslims, Uqba ibn Nafi. He was the nephew of Amir ibn al-Ayaz. He was ambushed and killed by Kausala, leader of the Araba tribe of the Berber people, and the Christian head of the Sanhaja Confederation. Meanwhile, the third rightly guided Caliph Osman ibn Affan was murdered inside his house by Muslims due to his corruption and bad leadership. Ali ibn Abi Talib was appointed the fourth and last rightly guided caliph. Ali's caliphate did not last for long before he was also assassinated by another Muslim. After the death of Ali, his rival Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, Wali/governor of Syria, declared himself caliph and began the Umayyad dynasty, which made Damascus its main capital. When Uqba ibn Nafi was murdered by the Berbers in North Africa, the Umayyad caliph in Damascus sent a new Muslim military commander, Musa ibn Nasir. From his name, it is clear that Musa was born as a Christian but converted to Islam. His story of conversion began when he was a small boy living in a monastery in Syria with some Syrian monks. He was under training to learn the Bible and theology, and then to become a monk. However, Khalid ibn al-Walid invaded the monastery and took him as a captive. Khalid converted him to Islam and made him a slave in his house. Being converted and brought up by such an outstanding military general of Islam turned out to be a great honor for Musa ibn Nasir. The Christian boy was brainwashed and turned into a bitter enemy of Jesus and his followers. When he was grown up, he became himself an outstanding military general of the Islamic troops. He was assigned by the Umayyad caliphs the task of reclaiming North Africa to Islam. Musa ibn Nasir, Moses the son of a small Christian, learned from the mistake of the slain leader, Uqba ibn Nafi, and started to move slowly and convert the Berbers, today known as Amazigh or Tamazight, to Islam. Uqba converted the entire region of North Africa, today Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Niger, Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Morocco, in just a few months. Musa ibn Nasir took a few years to accomplish the same task. After subduing and converting the Berber tribes, Musa ibn Nasir began to think of moving to the Iberian Peninsula, today Spain and Portuguese. However, Musa knew that he was growing old and such a task needed a young and strong commander. Surprisingly, such a commander turned out to be one of the defeated and subdued Berbers, Tariq ibn Ziyad. Those who fought for so long against the invaders and tried, by all means, to keep their Christian faith in a few years were turned into Muslim invaders themselves. Tariq ibn Ziyad was a fierce and successful Muslim commander. He was nicknamed the Khalid ibn al-Walid of the Berbers. Tariq ibn Ziyad made a solemn vow to convert Europe entirely until Rome and capture it for Islam. Muslims claimed that the Prophet Muhammad promised them that they would invade and open Constantinople and Rome, the two great capitals of Christendom, and turn the entire Christian world Muslim. History shows they tried for 7 centuries to invade and capture Constantinople but failed. However, the so-called prophecy of their false prophet was partially fulfilled when the Ottoman Sultan, Muhammad II, Muhammad the Conqueror, captured and destroyed Constantinople in 1453, modern-day Istanbul. After they brought an end to the Byzantine Empire, the Muslim Ottomans destroyed half of Europe to fulfill that prophecy, but it didn't work. Muslims still hold to the false prophecy and believe one day they will invade and take Rome, the capital of Italy and the center of the Roman Catholic Church. Tariq ibn Ziyad succeeded in invading Spain and converting thousands of its population to Islam. According to Dr. Bill Warner, in Spain, Muslims made piles of Christian heads, slain in battle, so that men on horsebacks could not see each other across. Tariq continued to take city after city, and in brief time, he converted the majority of the population into Islam. However, Tariq needed more troops because the Iberian Peninsula was too big for his small army of 12,000. He sent for his master and leader, Musa ibn Nasir, who was living in the city of Al-Kairouan, Tunisia. Musa forwarded the demand of Tariq to the Caliph at Damascus. By this time the capital of the Islamic State was changed twice. From Medina was moved by the fourth Caliph Ali to Kufa in Iraq. When Ali was murdered it was moved by the Caliph Muawiyah to Damascus. Finally, the Abbasid caliphs would move it back to Baghdad, today the capital of Iraq. When the Muslims of Arabia and Levant heard that a big door for jihad in the way of Allah was opened in Europe, hundreds of thousands of them gathered from Yemen, Iraq, Mecca, Medina, Damascus, Palestine, and Egypt. The numbers of the new Mujahideen had far exceeded what Tariq needed. Therefore, the Caliph selected 18,000 strong fighters and sent the rest back to their places. After supplying the new troops, the Caliph sent a letter and demanded that Tariq ibn Ziyad should send to him 3,000 blonde virgins, young white girls. As soon as the letter reached Tariq ibn Ziyad, he fulfilled the demand of his Caliph and sent the 3,000 captured Christian teenage girls. This established a direct relationship between Tariq and the Caliph of Damascus, which led him to ignore the orders of his master, Musa ibn Nasir, the Wali of North Africa. Musa understood that Tariq was pulling rank in him. Out of jealousy, he commanded Tariq to stop his rapid conquests and wait for him until he reached Andalusia, the ancient name of the Iberian Peninsula. Tariq ibn Ziyad refused to obey and continued to conquer city after city. I wonder when Tariq and his satanic mujahideen were invading, killing, raping, and converting the Christians of Spain to Islam by the sword, why the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, the kings of Europe, and the Byzantine Emperor at Constantinople were silent and showed blind eye to the slaughter and suffering of their Christian brothers and sisters in the Iberian Peninsula. When Musa ibn Nasir reached the newly conquered lands with an army from Morocco under the leadership of his son, they also invaded many cities in the western region before they met with Tariq ibn Ziyad. When Musa ibn Nasir reached Tariq ibn Ziyad, he humiliated him in front of his troops. He tied him with ropes and flogged him severely for daring to disobey his orders. Most probably, the news of this fight between those two big military commanders reached the ears of the Caliph at Damascus. Therefore, without giving any explanation, the Caliph ordered both commanders to halt their jihad invasions and return immediately to Damascus. When the two reached Damascus, Tariq ibn Ziyad mysteriously disappeared, and no one knew anything about him. Musa ibn Nasir was sent to Mecca for pilgrimage, and also died mysteriously in Medina. The disappearances of those two ruthless commanders diminished the military power of the Muslim armies in Andalusia, and finally led to their crashing defeat by the Frankish king, Charles Martel, the mayor of the palace, at the Battle of Tours, October 752. The Battle of Tours was fought between the huge Muslim army under the leadership of Abdul Rahman Ghafaji of 30,000 mujahideen, and the Frankish army of 25,000 soldiers. Muslim historians exaggerated and put the number of the Frankish army to 400,000. The Muslim army continued to advance in Europe and invaded South France. It kept on conquering and advancing until it reached 30 miles away from the capital city, Paris. On their way to Paris, the Muslims invaded many Frankish villages, towns, and cities and collected huge amounts of booties. Many of the Muslim mujahideen felt that they had gotten enough spoils and needed to go back to Andalusia and return another time to invade the capital of the infidels. Nevertheless, their commander, Abdurrahman Ghafaji, insisted on continuing to Paris. He believed in the promise of his prophet that great and blessed Muslim commanders were going to invade and capture Rome and Constantinople. Moreover, at the time of the Battle of Tours, the Islamic military power reached its zenith. By then, it was the most powerful army in the entire world. At that time, Europe was not united under one military power. Therefore, the leader of the Moors was fully confident of victory. Arabs, Berbers, and Christians of Andalusia who were converted to Islam were known as Moors. The Franks just wanted to defend their country from the invading army. When the two armies met and the battle began, the Moors were showing superiority, and the battle was in their favor. However, Charles Martel understood the mentality of the Muslim Moors, and knew exactly where their weak point lay. He understood that the Muslims were fighting for the booties, especially the women, and wealth of the infidels. That interest did not surpass their interest in converting the infidels to Islam. They knew that if an infidel converts to Islam, then they cannot take his women and wealth. But if he remains an infidel, then they have the right to either kill him and get all his possessions, women, wealth, cattle, and property, or force him to pay the jizya in gold. Modern historical research proves that the early Muslim mujahideen never carried copies of the Quran with them, but had only their swords, spears, and horses on them. Before the Battle of Tours, the Moorish mujahideen had already accumulated huge heaps of booty. The Moors kept their booty at the rear, leaving a few mujahideen guards. Charles Martel, with a small excursion force, attacked the booty, killing the Muslim guards and setting the huge heaps of the loot on fire. The Moors felt as if someone was setting their own families on fire. Therefore, they broke their ranks and ran to save their booty. Such action led to confusion among the Moors. Their leaders lost control of the ranks. Immediately, the Franks ambushed the Moors and began to kill them. Some historians said that the Moors were so confused that they began to kill each other. Their main commander, Abd ar-Rahman Ghafiqi, was also killed in the melee. When their commander was slain, the Muslims began to flee from the battleground, leaving their booty and dead. It was a great victory for the Franks. Charles Martel emerged as a great hero and a savior of the West. He was nicknamed by the Pope of Rome, Charles Martel, which means Charles the Hammer. The Pope borrowed the name from the Jewish commander, Judas Maccabeus, in Hebrew Judas the Hammer, who defeated the Syrians under Antiochus IV in 165 BC, and rededicated the temple in Jerusalem. Many historians believe that the Battle of Tours saved Christianity and the Western civilization. Some historians believe that had the Moors won the Battle of Tours, Europe would be today an Arabian continent, and the Europeans would be Muslims speaking Arabic. The causalities of the Frankish army were 1,100 dead, while the Muslim army lost 12,000, including their main leader, Abd-Rahman Ghafiqi. Chapter 23. The atrocities of the Muslim invasions. After their defeat at the Battle of Tours, Muslim Moors never dared again invade France or try to advance in Western Europe. However, they continued to attack Constantinople for 700 years until they captured and destroyed it in 1453. Millions of the citizens of the Byzantine Empire fled to Europe and Russia. Those who remained were forcibly converted to Islam. Today, 99% of the Muslims of Turkey were once Orthodox Christians of Anatolia, which was part of the lost Byzantine Empire. However, some historians said that the Second Rome, Constantinople, did not fall, but it moved to Russia, and Moscow became the Third Rome. According to Dr. Bill Warner, Islam always inspires fear in the hearts of Westerners. How North Africa changed from being a Christian to a Muslim. How the Arab countries changed from Christian to Muslim countries. 25 years before the advent of Islam, the Persians and the Byzantines had a massive war in which 1/3 of the population died. 1/3 of the Byzantine Empire was destroyed by the Black Death, or bubonic plague. Dr. Bill Warner said, there were 548 battles waged by the early Islamic mujahideen. According to Dr. Bill Warner, the classical Western civilization did not collapse because of the invasions of the Germanic tribes, but it had been destroyed by the Islamic invasions. Muhammad sent fighters to all Arab tribes to offer them Islam. If they refused to accept the offer of Islam, they were summarily annihilated. Muhammad sent his chief commander, Khalid ibn al-Walid, to the largest Arab tribe known as Jazima. Khalid destroyed the entire tribes because they rejected the offer of Islam and decided to fight. Their women and children were taken as captives, women got raped, and children sold in slave markets. At the Battle of Qadisiyah, July 636, Khalid cut the head of the Persian commander and raped his wife on the ground. Her husband's blood was spilled. Khalid followed the example of Muhammad, who was killed at the invasion of Khaybar, the Jewish leader, Rabbi ibn Kinana, and took his wife, Safiya bint Huyai, and raped her on the same day he murdered her husband. During the Wars of Apostasy, Khalid killed an Arab leader, known as Malik ibn Niyara, cooked and ate his head, and raped his wife at the same time. At the Battle of Ulais, May 633, in Iraq, Khalid and his troops continued to put the losers of the battle in bags, and cut off their heads until the stream ran red with their blood. The entire Persian army of 30,000 to 35,000 were slain by Muslims. Dr. Bill Warner continued to say that the second Caliph Omar's troops invaded the Levant, and also Jerusalem, and those Jews and Christians who refused the compulsory offer of Islam were turned into dhimmis, third-class citizens and semi-slaves. The dhimmis are the Jews or Christians who agreed to pay the jizya to Muslims. The majority of the Arab Christians could not afford to pay the heavy jizya, and hence forcibly converted to Islam. During the so-called Golden Age of Islam, during the Abbasid dynasty, Muslims attacked the Sindh region in India and killed 26,000 Hindus in one single battle. Armenian nobles fled and took refuge in a church, the building was destroyed, and all were burned inside. At Ephesus city, 7,000 Greek Christians were enslaved. All new churches were destroyed. In Egypt and Syria, 30,000 churches were burned down and destroyed. In Thessalonica, 22,000 Greek Christians were enslaved. In Seville, thousands of Christians were massacred. 6,000 Jews in Morocco were killed. Hundreds of Jews in Cordoba were killed. 4,000 of Granada killed. Georgia and Armenia invaded. In another battle in Hindustan, India, 15,000 were killed and 500,000, 500,000, enslaved, the majority of them young girls and children. In Yemen, the Jews were given two choices: convert to Islam or die. Christians of Granada were deported to Morocco. In India, many cities were destroyed, and Hindus were told to convert or die. Muslim commanders boasted among themselves about who would make the biggest and tallest hills of Hindu skulls. Some of them gained the titles of idol smashers. Thousands of Hindu girls were raped, and untold numbers of children were enslaved. In one town, 20,000 were enslaved. Buddhist monks were butchered, Buddhist nuns raped. Damascus and Safed were invaded and mass murdered Christians. In Marrakesh, Jews were massacred, and in Tabriz, Jews were forcibly converted. The Cairo riots led to churches being burned. The Mongol Muslim commander, Tamerlane, Timur the Lame, killed as many as 90,000 Hindus in one day. He gained the title of the evilest man ever lived. In another battle, Tamerlane massacred 30,000 surrendered Hindus in cold blood. He devastated 700 Hindu villages. Tamerlane also invaded Iraq and annihilated Nestorian and Jacobite Christians. Half of the population of Afghanistan were Christians, but Tamerlane made it completely Muslim. Another Muslim leader, called Tughlaq, took 180,000 Hindus as slaves. After 700 years of continuous attacks, Islam captured and destroyed Constantinople. The son of Tamerlane, Babur, invaded India and destroyed thousands of Hindu temples and forced conversions. Muslim generals built 2 tall towers of human heads after their victories. Hindu women committed mass suicides to avoid sexual slavery and rape. According to Dr. Bill Warner, the Jews of Persia and Yemen were forced to convert, followed by forced conversions of Greek Christians to Islam. In Persia also persecution of Zoroastrians increased, and those who survived the massacres fled to India. In India, 600,000 Hindus were killed by Akbar, the greatest Mughal emperor. Jews of Jeddah were expelled, and Jews of Morocco were massacred. Forced conversions of Jews in Iran. Zoroastrians were annihilated in Iran. Jews of Baghdad were massacred. About 250,000 Armenian Christians were slaughtered in Turkey. In the 20th century, over 1 million Turkish Armenian Christians were killed in jihad. In 15 years, the entire Persian Empire was defeated and converted to Islam. In 25 years, Islam spread from China to Tunisia, in North Africa. Nevertheless, Islam could not destroy the entire Byzantine Empire. In a fleeting period, it took 2/3 of its lands: Levant, Egypt, North Africa, and Spain. No empire in human history lasted as long as the Byzantine Empire. It lasted for 1,123 years. The Roman Empire lasted for 800 years, the Ottoman Empire for 500 years, and the Chinese Manchu Empire for 300 years. The Emperor Justinian built the Dome of Hagia Sophia. The Byzantine Empire stretched from Serbia, Bulgaria, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Israel/Palestine, Syria, and part of Italy, and had 1,000 cities. Unfortunately, the demise of this great empire was caused by the Fourth Crusade. In 1204, the Republic of Venice hired the Fourth Crusaders from French, German, and Italian contingents. Instead of liberating the Holy Land from Muslims, the Crusaders invaded and sacked Constantinople. The Byzantines considered them to be brothers in the Christian faith, and hence they were not prepared for the attack. After invading and controlling Constantinople, the Crusaders continued to rob and steal the wealth of the empire. For 50 uninterrupted years, all the treasures and gold of the empire were carried away. Besides that, earthquakes and plagues weakened the empire. The city recovered after 50 years, but the Byzantine Empire would never recover from the barbaric assault of the Fourth Crusade. Recover from the barbaric assault of the Fourth Crusade. In the year 1453, Sultan Muhammad II of the Ottoman Empire used cannons and destroyed the 3 walls of Constantinople. Those cannons were made by a Christian Westerner who sold himself to the Muslim Sultan Muhammad II. That traitor first approached the Byzantine emperor and offered his new weapons. When the Byzantine emperor could not afford to give him what he wanted, he turned to the enemy and sold his deadly merchandise to him. The cannons allowed Ottomans to finally destroy the 3 walls of the strongly fortified city. When Sultan Muhammad II took the city, he gathered all the rich citizens, chopped off their heads, and had their bodies thrown at the dogs. It is said that the Sultan killed the rich citizens of Constantinople because they refused to lend money to their emperor to purchase the cannons. The Muslim Ottomans laid siege to the city with an army of 200,000 men. At that time, Constantinople was defended by 7,000 men, of whom 2,000 were foreigners. The Sultan's troops were Turkish, Anatolians, and Janissaries. The victory of the battle marked the end of the greatest empire in human history, an empire that lasted for 1,123 years. The city's fall was a massive blow to Christendom. Pope Nicholas V immediately ordered a counterattack, but his sudden death put an end to that plan. Many Greeks fled the city and migrated to other parts of Europe, in particular Italy. Their arrival ignited the Renaissance. Many scholars believe that the fall of Constantinople marked the end of the Middle Ages, or the Dark Ages. Many Greek Orthodox Christians fled to Russia. Russia became the spiritual successor of the Byzantine Empire. Some historians said that the Great Byzantine Empire did not fall, but it moved to the east and Moscow became the Third Rome. 410 was considered the year Rome first fell when the barbarians invaded it. However, historians believe that the Western Empire, the Roman Empire, did not fall until 476 after the barbarian leader, Odoacer, deposed the last emperor Romulus, and that marked the final fall of Rome. Odoacer established himself leader in Italy. The glory of Rome was ended when a pagan leader made himself a king in Rome. Rome. Odoacer established himself leader in Italy. The glory of Rome was ended when a pagan leader made himself a king in Rome. In fact, at that time only the western half of Rome fell. The Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, continued to exist in the area called Byzantium. The Crusaders, many secular writers try to find many reasons to blame the Church for sending the Crusaders to liberate the Holy Land from the Muslims. Some of the Roman Catholic Crusaders indeed committed hideous crimes against innocent people. They committed atrocities against their fellow Greek Orthodox Christians of the Byzantine Empire. They also committed genocides against the Jews of Europe and those in the Holy City, Jerusalem. They also indiscriminately killed many innocent Muslim women, children, and the elderly. In retrospect, the Crusaders' crimes were a far lesser evil in scale compared to the huge genocides and mass murders committed by Muslim mujahideen everywhere their feet took them. It is estimated that the Islamic conquests, or invasions, led to the death of 60 million Christians and 80 million Hindus. Initially, the Crusades against the Muslim lands were meant to push back the Turks who invaded and captured many Christian lands. The call for the Crusades was initiated by the Byzantine Emperor. The Emperor Alexios Komnenos I sought the help of the Pope of Rome, Urban II. He asked for knights to assist his troops kick the Muslim Turks out of his lands, which they recently invaded and captured. Pope Urban II seized the opportunity and declared a universal holy war against the pagans, Muslims, who were living in the Holy Land. In one of his public sermons, he likened the Holy City, Jerusalem, to a virgin bride that has been defiled by the unholy pagans. Instead of a few trained knights, 500,000 people responded to the call of the Pope and began their holy march towards Palestine. None of them were trained soldiers. As such, many were killed by the Turks as soon as they reached Anatolia. Some of them died of starvation and fatigue. The Roman Catholic Church immediately denounced them and prepared the First Crusade, which was headed by the French nobles and their well-trained armies of knights. Knights. In 1095, Pope Urban II proclaimed the First Crusade with the stated goal of restoring Christian access to holy places in and near Jerusalem. Following the First Crusade, there was an intermittent 200-year struggle for control of the Holy Land, with 7 more major crusades and numerous minor ones. Roman Catholic Europe mounted no further coherent response after the fall of the last Christian stronghold, Acre 1291. The military crusades were a 200-year struggle between Roman Catholic Europe and the Islamic sultanates of Anatolia, Levant, Palestine, and Egypt. It produced great heroes from both sides such as Richard the Lionheart and Saladin. By the year 1000 AD, 2/3 of the Christian world was possessed by the Muslim invaders. Out of the important 5 ancient Christian cities, 3 were taken by Muslims: Jerusalem, Antioch, and Alexandria. Only Constantinople and Rome remained in the hands of Christians. Muslims believed these cities too were destined for them. They claimed that their prophet Muhammad told them that they were going to invade and possess Constantinople and Rome. Islam became the superpower of the medieval world. Each year brought forth new invasions and new possessions of Christian lands. In 1071, the Turks invaded Asia Minor and possessed the region of Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. The inhabitants of this large region were new converts to Islam. They were invaded and converted by the sword. They were like the Berber tribes of North Africa. They were not Arabs but had migrated from Asia to the region of Asia Minor. They became more zealous than those who had converted them. They behaved like the Muslim Mongol Great Ghazi, Great Invader, Tamerlane, who turned against other Muslims and invaded and captured their countries. After their forcible conversion to Islam, the Muslim Turks turned against their Arab masters and attacked them. They took Syria and Palestine from the Arab Muslims and began their own caliphate, Ottoman Sultanate or Empire. However, since the Prophet Muhammad said in one of his authentic hadiths, only an Arab Muslim from the Quraysh tribe can be appointed caliph, therefore the Turks called their caliphs sultans and their caliphate sultanate. Therefore the Turks called their caliphs sultans and their caliphate sultanate. The last Arab caliphate was destroyed by the Mongols, Genghis Khan, in 1258. On February 13, 1258, Hulagu, the main general commander of Genghis Khan's troops, invaded Baghdad and assassinated the last Abbasid caliph, Al-Mustasim Billah, and ended that 500-year-old caliphate. Nevertheless, the Mongols picked up the virus and soon they too would be converted to Islam, and would wreak havoc of unceasing Islamic invasions and convert millions to Islam in Asia, East Europe, and Russia. Those invasions were done by Tamerlane. We see the same pattern with the Berbers, Turks, and Mongols, all forcibly converted to Islam, contaminated to a greater degree, spreading their increasingly virulent contagion. Tamerlane was a Mongol warrior who was Turkishist and a convert to Islam. He claims direct descent from Genghis Khan. The name Tamerlane is an English corruption of his real name Timur. He was known as Timur the Lame because when he was a young boy, he stole a sheep and got shot with a bow by a shepherd, and that rendered him lame for the rest of his life. Tamerlane means Timur the Lame. At first, Tamerlane called himself the Sword of Islam. According to Islamic tradition, the honorable title of the Sword of Islam was bestowed by the Prophet Muhammad on his military genius, Khalid ibn al-Walid. Tariq ibn Ziyad was nicknamed Khalid ibn al-Walid of the Berber tribes. After conquering many lands in Asia and Europe, Tamerlane, Timur the Lame, decided to declare himself the new Muslim caliph, but was told by Muslim scholars that he couldn't be a caliph because he wasn't an Arab. Not every Muslim Arab can be a caliph of the Prophet Muhammad. According to Muhammad, his caliph must be a Muslim man, an Arab man, and a direct descendant of the Prophet's tribe of the Quraysh. Therefore, since the last Abbasid caliph was captured and put in a sack and trodden underfoot and brutally killed by Hulagu, Genghis' chief commander, no Muslim man has ever claimed to be a caliph except the contemporary Muslim terrorist leader, Abu Bakr Hussein al-Baghdadi al-Quraishi, the leader of today's ISIS, the Islamic State or Caliphate. Raishi, the leader of today's ISIS, the Islamic State or Caliphate. For 756 years no one has claimed that honorific except this terrible leader of the evilest terrorist group ever produced by the religion of peace. Accordingly, young Muslim men and women from all over the world immigrate to Turkey, Syria, and Iraq to join the army of the newly resurrected Islamic Caliphate. Following his defeat of the Christian Knights Hospitallers and the capture of their stronghold city of Smyrna, Tamerlane changed his title from the Sword of Islam to the greatest Muslim Ghazi, the greatest Muslim invader. He established a Muslim empire that extended from Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Pakistan, until Kashgar in China. It reached up to Moscow in Russia and Delhi in India. He made his capital in an oasis in the desert in a city known as Samarkand, today the capital of Uzbekistan. His Islamic invasions had caused the deaths of 20 million people. After their victory in the Battle of Manzikert in 1071, the Seljuk Turks defeated the Byzantine army and captured Anatolia and Armenia. Islamic invasions of Europe were halted at the gates of Vienna in 1683. Most of the above-mentioned brief information about the atrocities of Islamic invasions is based on a lecture by Dr. Bill Warner. In the 548 battles waged by Muslim Mujahideen during the 500 years of spreading Islam, historians estimated that 272 million people were killed. It is the bloodiest religion in human history. No other religion in the entire history of mankind on the planet Earth had come even remotely close to the mass murders, massacres, genocides, destruction, and debris that the so-called religion of peace had done. The Bible said about them, "Their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their paths. And the path of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes." Romans 3, verses 15 to 17. Note that Islam is the youngest religion among the major religions of the world. Judaism came 2,200 years before Islam, Hinduism 1,700 years ago, Buddhism 1,200 years ago, and Christianity 700 years ago. And none of them had caused such destruction and misery in our world as Islam did and continues to do every day and every minute through the widely spread terrorist attacks and civil wars in Syria, Iraq, Libya, Tunisia, Yemen, Egypt, Lebanon, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nigeria, Somalia, and Sudan. It all started with a single tyrant and a demon-possessed man called Muhammad.